Hi there, Simon Stokes here, Ableton Certified Trainer at Shugle Studios in Glasgow, and in this video we're going to take a little look at the top section of Push. Now this is where you add devices, add your effects, choose instruments, change your tempo and all this kind of important stuff, so it's quite important that we get stuck into this first. And of course we've got this lovely big screen, these encoders and all of these buttons on each side of the screen, so that's what we're going to go through in this video and get to grips with how all of this works basically. So first of all, up in the top left hand side here of Push, we've got this tempo section where we're going to be able to change our tempo. So these two encoders at the very top, it might be slightly difficult to see these because they're black on the Push. They don't come out well in the video. But you see if you just touch one of them, these are touch sensitive, these encoders. So when I touch one, you see that the screen changes to represent the value of that encoder currently. So if I let go of it, you see it disappears and it just takes a light touch, and that becomes really handy because all of these encoders are like that, and it means that you can quickly find out the values of the levels of tracks or where your effects are and things like that just by touching an encoder. So it's often overlooked that, but well worth remembering. So you can tell that this is the tempo control, and when I touch this one, this is the swing control because it gives me my swing amount, which is at 0. Now we're going to look at swing a little later on when we come to some real-time recording. But in this first one, this tempo control is really important. So this just lets you set the BPM of your project. Fairly self-explanatory that. Below that, we've got this tap tempo button. If I turn on the metronome, that's going to make it so that when I press play on my project, you're going to hear a click along with the beat, and you can hear that if I take the tempo up using this control here, you'll hear the BPM getting faster. And if I tap this tempo, I just tapped it 4 times, and you can see now that my BPM in my project is changed to 173 BPM, and if I hold this, you can see that as well. I'm going to take it back to 120 just by pressing delete on that. Take it back to 120, and I'll turn this metronome off for just now. So that's what that section there does. The tap tempo is really useful maybe if you're playing along with a band or something like that and you want to try and nudge yourself into time with them. You can just hit the tap tempo and that should set it up quite nicely. Over the other two controls here, we've got these delete and undo controls. Now these are really useful. We're going to use them a lot as we go along. The delete control you can use for deleting tracks, you can use it for deleting effects, you can use it for deleting clips and notes and all sorts of things. So we're going to use that delete control a lot as we go along. We'll look at that shortly. And undo obviously lets you undo your last actions right back to the last time when you saved. Also a really handy feature of Live. Over on the right hand side here, we've got this section which relates to the display really. So that brings up things that you can see on the display to choose devices and instruments. So the first and most important one really is this browse button. When we choose browse, what it's going to do is bring up a list of all the relevant devices, that could be instruments, effects or whatever, which apply to the currently selected track. So if I just press browse again, you can see I've got a MIDI track selected here. See how that's highlighted on the display here. So when I press browse, it's going to bring up a list of instruments, audio effects, MIDI effects, anything that I can load onto a MIDI track basically. So if I use the encoders, if you look along the top of the screen here, we've got these 8 encoders and they represent the columns on the display here. So if I use the first one, I can scroll down to instruments say, and I could choose an instrument from there. Maybe for now I'll take some drums. And then I can use the second one, and you can see just by touching them you can go between the different columns, and that lets me kind of skip through and find something. So I could go along, let's see, I'll maybe let's take a nice 808 kit. You can hear now that we're getting this preview, which is a new thing for Live 9.5. You can always disable that by pressing this button here, but it's actually a really handy thing I think to be able to preview it. And you can see once I've chosen a kit that I like, I can press the load button over here on the right hand side, which is the button below the screen. And you see that's going to load on that 808 drum rack onto the currently selected track. So browse always loads something onto the currently selected track. You can see that if I play through these notes, we've got an 808 kit. And if I hit browse again and then we go along, let's skip along and see, go to 909 and press load on that. Now it's going to bring up a 909 kit, and that has just loaded on the same track that we were on before. So it's just overwritten the 808 one really, and so you use browse really for replacing devices on a particular track. So you can use it to load your first instrument or drum machine or whatever it is that you like, and then anytime you press it after that, it's kind of going to replace the device that's on there. So that's really nice. It also changes depending on what it is that you've got selected. We'll have a look at that in just a little bit. But browse is where you should start with push, really. It's all about loading onto the currently selected track. That's the important thing to take home from that one. Add track, on the other hand, which is right next to it, is going to create a new track. Now you can see at the moment I've got a track for my 909, I've got a MIDI track and 2 audio tracks in my project. If I go to add track, it's going to bring up this list. Do you want to load a MIDI track, audio track, or a return track? So say I wanted to bring another drum machine onto a new track, I could go to drums and I could scroll along and I could load an 808 onto this one. So let's find an 808 kit. Okay, 808 classic will do, and press load. Now you'll see what happens this time is it loads a new kit. It's given it a new color as well, which is quite nice. Another addition for 9.5. But you can see this time I've got my original 909 kit here and my 808 kit next to it. Now you can use these buttons below the screen to just quickly flick between different tracks. So if I wanted to go back to my 909, I could press that one. If I wanted to go back to my 808, I can press that one. Very, very simple. And you can see I've got a MIDI track and 2 other audio tracks here, which I can quickly flick between. Really nice and simple way of getting around all the different devices in your project. Let's say, for example, I just wanted to stick with the 808 kit and didn't want this 909 kit that I'd created. You could just hold delete and press that button there, and that's going to delete the track. And that kind of works for so many different things in Live and on Push. You'll kind of see that as we go along. You can use this delete for all sorts of things. If you ever want to get rid of something, think of this delete button first, because it's actually very, very versatile and can be used for a lot of different things. So now I've just got my 808 kit up here, and you can see when I loaded the 808 kit, the display is changed to represent all these different controls. Now we can manipulate those just by using the encoders above them. So you can see that each control relates to an encoder, and if you just tap on an encoder, you can see what control it is that you're currently tweaking. So say, for example, I've just pressed my kick drum here. Now all these encoders relate to the kick drum. So if I change the pitch, you see how you can dial that in. I could bring the decay down a bit with this encoder. And I could add a bit of compression with this. So it gives you really hands-on control, and this is why it sometimes feels like you're playing an instrument rather than just a controller for a piece of software. It's one of the things I absolutely love about Push. So yeah, we can manipulate all our parameters, and you can see with the drum rack, a lot of them are programmed so that if I now select the clap, I'm changing the pitch of that clap, but my kick drum pitch remains the same. So a lot of the different drum racks will give you these kind of set of macro controls here which you can work with. So it's a really nice way to work, and the encoders just make it such a quick and easy way of adding things in. So we've looked at browse, which is all about loading something onto the currently selected track, and add track, which is all about loading something onto a new track. We've also got add device at the top. So say, for example, I choose add device. Again, this is context sensitive. It depends what kind of track you're on. So I'm on a MIDI track just now with a drum rack on it, an 808 drum rack. It's brought up other options of things that I can add onto that track. So I could replace it, very similar to with browse. I could replace it with a different drum kit or whatever. But I can also add an audio effect or something like that. So say, for example, I go to audio effects and use the second encoder to scroll down. Let's just try putting a reverb onto here, and I'll just tap the third encoder. This is something you got to remember with this. When you just got this reverb selected here, you can't load it in. Oops, my mistake. You can't load it in. You have to select the third row. And a really nice way of doing that, when I scroll through my effects, I choose reverb, I just tap that encoder, and then I can load. And you can see that will load it onto the track. So that's really nice, quick and easy way of doing that. Now when I press add device, it's going to give me another list of things, and I could add, after that, I could put on, you know, whatever you want. A ping pong delay, tap the third encoder, press load, sorry. And you can see that's applied those effects to the whole kind of drum rack that I've got in here. So that's what add device does. It's all about adding in kind of new devices to the track, and it's context sensitive, so it'll only let you load a MIDI effect if you're on a MIDI track, for example. You can see along the top, once I've added those, along the bottom of these lower display buttons let me flick through the different tracks. And along the top, we've got these new upper display buttons, which weren't here on Push 1. But we've got these new ones here that let you see the sort of chain of effects and instruments that are on the track. So you can see here on the left-hand side, there's my 808 kit. then I've got a specific chain in that drum rack, and you can kind of see all the different effects and stuff that are in that chain. And then I've got reverb and ping pong delay on the right hand side, and these are the ones that I just added using add device. Now I can just delete those very, very simply. If I hold down delete and just press reverb, then press ping pong delay, you can see that's got rid of those effects from the track, and now I can just play it without any effects. Really, really nice and easy to do. So I love those kind of features. I love being able to do as much as you can from the device without ever going back to have a look at the screen. So far we've kind of just built up this. We can kind of work out how to add different devices from here. Other buttons that we've got this device button, which is really, really important, and this just lets you see the parameters for the currently selected device. So if I added a new device, let's add an audio effect, and I added a filter onto here, tap the third encoder and load. You can see that it's gone back to device mode, which means I can see all the parameters of my filter. Really nice and simple. If I was in browse mode and you wanted to get back to see the parameters that you want to tweak on a particular device, you just go back to device mode, and that lets you see whatever is selected. So if I choose a different device just by clicking along the top, you can see that selects a different device in my chain in live, and it also lets me see the relevant parameters for those devices. So just make sure anytime you want to tweak your reverbs or effects or instruments and things, make sure device button is pressed, and then you'll get all the options for that. Next along, we've got this mix button. Now this is just going to let us set volumes, pans, and sends A and B for all the different tracks in my project. So when it's set to volumes, you can see that this is my Kit 808 track, this is my MIDI track, and my two other audio tracks. I could get rid of those just now. I'm not using them right now, so let's just hold delete and just press on those three, and I'll just get rid of them. So there's my 808 track, and you can see now that encoder 1 is now turning the level up and down on my on that track. Very simple. So that's an overview of the kind of top section of Push here. We've got another control here, this master volume. This is just going to change the master volume fader in live. Now, I highly recommend that you don't use this at all. It's a bad habit to get into, to be turning up and down this master fader. The reason for that is you could have a problem whereby, let's say, for example, our 808 kit here is actually clipping. Let's turn that right up. And you can see on the track in live there that is clipping. Now, if I turn down the master fader, it now looks like it's not clipping in live, but that's actually a bit of a problem. You want to know if something is clipping. It's still clipping on the original track, and it's just been turned down afterwards. So that's the problem with using the master fader. I would just leave this exactly where it is. If you need to turn it down, turn down your laptop or your speakers, but don't use the master fader in live. It's just a bad habit to get into. Other than that, we've pretty much covered everything. There's a setup button here. We'll have a look at these different workflows a little later on. There's also a user mode, which is largely unused, but you can get different kind of user scripts that let you use all the parameters on Push in a different way. So in the next video, we're going to take a little look at using the pads and starting to step sequence with them, and we're going to move around the other parameters on Push and how to use those as well.